Provider, one of the key elements in working with the family is to provide the family detailed information pertaining to the confidentiality and informed consent. It is important that the social worker be watchful of behaviors that may contribute to this experience being very perceived as impersonal by the client. Being too friendly or casual with the client when addressing confidentiality and informed consent may jeopardize the trust that the client may develop with the social worker. Imposing on the client, handing them the form without explaining in detail and explaining the ability and control that the client has in completing the form can be also be perceived as I'm not taking serious as the client. So that also can jeopardize the trust building between the client and the social worker. Being vague, presenting the information only to the clients with very limited information can also be a contributing factor to the client not taking serious to the involvement with the social worker. It is important that the social worker covers confidentiality with the client as to who and what and when and what type of information can be shared and with whom. This could alleviate any anxiety that the client may have as to how their information will be used, stored, and shared with. It is important that the social worker explains very thoroughly to the client when they're signing a form of either by reading the form to the client or providing a copy to the client to read and covering every detail and every portion of the form as part of informed consent. Explaining to the client the responsibility as a mandatory reporter is very important at this point when interviewing and beginning to work with the family. It is important to explain to the client and provide a copy of the informed consent that they sign. Explain the expiration date and explain the right to revoke the informed consent form, as well as limit the information or the parties that they choose to have their information shared with. In certain situations, the client at the beginning may feel pressured or anxious and would like to provide consent for the department to share so much information with other parties, and later consider that was not a good judgment call. So they need to be explained that they have the right to come back and make modifications or revoke the current one and create a new one. In a scenario when working with the family and that involves confidentiality, a scenario may be that the social worker can convey to the client, I understand how concerned you are about how this information could be used, how much information will be collected, and who will be viewing this information. So I can assure you that this information will only be shared with those that you assign and appoint to share with. Reassure to the client that they are in control of how much information can be shared pertaining to their medical information or their information addressed with the department. Explaining in very thoroughly to the client their rights to confidentiality and what confidentiality entails as to sharing with other parties. Usually clients feel unease about family members or others trying to reach out to a social worker to obtain information on their case. So the client needs to be reassured that any random person coming out of the streets would not be provided with such privileged information.